Do you want to investigate unknowable horrors, monsters, and eldritch gods, and try and prevent them from taking over this world or doing more damage to the world and contorting it and changing it to whatever they want? And over time, you'll investigate and find out more and more about them. And as you do, you slowly start to lose your sanity and knowing what is right and what is wrong and what is real and what is not, until finally you try and face up against it and your brain just melts or you die a horrific death. But maybe it was all worth it in the end because you were able to prevent that monster from taking over just a little bit longer. But most of the time, it's not, as you die a futile death and nothing changes and the monster still takes over, but you're dead. Well, in today's episode of the RPG Goblin, that is exactly the game that we are going to be talking about, which is called Call of Cthulhu. Now, this game is crazy. This game is insane, as it is all about, it is a survival investigation horror about cosmic beings and eldritch gods and unknowable horrors and monsters and all of that. It's a lot, but it's a fantastic game, as I brought on Luke from Arcanekeeper to tell me all about Call of Cthulhu and what it can do, and also how to play the game and stories from his own personal games. And so if you find Lovecraftian horror or investigation or survival horror intriguing, please listen to this episode and consider playing Call of Cthulhu. So, let's get into it. All right. So, welcome to today's episode of the RPG Goblin. Hi, I'm Willow, and I am your host. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about Call of Cthulhu, which is a Lovecraftian horror investigation RPG that I have had on my radar for a while, and I haven't gotten super, into reading the books quite yet because it's a pretty hefty game. But I decided to bring on someone today to talk all about Call of Cthulhu. Luke, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So, hello, my name is Luke, aka Arcanekeeper. I am a keeper of arcane lore and a games master for a number of other games. And a big fan of Call of Cthulhu as a game and as a rule system.
Very nice. As well as if you would like to promote your Instagram and any other things that you do, you can do that here as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so I love self-promotion. I'm really good at it. So it's at Arcanekeeper, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube, and I'm on TikTok, all under that headline.
Perfect. Amazing. And yeah, so you kind of, from what I've seen, specialize in Call of Cthulhu and horror games in general, correct?
Yeah, it's weird because I'm not a huge horror movie guy, but I love horror books. I love horror RPGs. And it's just, I think they allow exploration into some really interesting themes and allow some really interesting storytelling. And Call of Cthulhu, because it is such an easy to learn system, it's easy to learn, very easy to introduce to people, and it does survival horror so well. It really serves the cause of survival horror.
Absolutely. Oh, that's amazing. So I guess actually that brings to the first question. What is Call of Cthulhu? I mean, I gave a little bit of an introduction at the beginning, but I don't really know a lot about the game. What is Call of Cthulhu?
Call of Cthulhu is a survival horror tabletop RPG, now in its 7th edition, created by Chaosium. It's a game that's characterized by fear of the unknown. It's a play-to-lose RPG. So inevitably, instead of your players leveling up, they do level up, but they will also inevitably die or go insane. And that's really the best case scenario. Yeah, big for survival horror, good for atmospheric storytelling, and it runs on a rule system called basic role playing, which is it's a D100 system, very straightforward.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah, I mean, like, I, for one, I definitely appreciate the environmental, like, build up and, survival aspects of horror. Personally, when you said at the beginning you don't like horror movies, I definitely agree. I'm not super big fan of horror movies, but like other horror media that really puts in the work and just to build up all the suspension, my favorite. And that's what I personally love about Call of Cthulhu, and that's why I'm so excited to talk to you about it. Um, and I think, I mean, you said it best is it's the survival. And is that the kind of stories that Call of Cthulhu is best at telling? Is like these survival stories?
Yes, Call of Cthulhu is at its heart really a survival horror, and that's because, and I'm a bit where I think we'll go into the more nitty gritty of the rules as we go on, but that's because it makes your characters very very squishy. And your characters will inevitably become more susceptible as goes on. Also built towards investigation. Call of Cthulhu is the only RPG where library use is a necessary skill. And like, if a player builds a character, and there's a skill in Call of Cthulhu which you will use all the time called spot hidden. If a player builds a character and they have like 20% in spot hidden, I'm like, redo your character sheet, I beg you.
Something went wrong.
Yes, it's built around role play. It's built around conversations. It's built around digging up clues. But inevitably, the mysteries in Call of Cthulhu will punish you for solving them.
It's so much like work to be put into like such high risk situations and all of that, like put in all that investigation just to like, you know, go insane.
Yeah, it's like, hey, great, you found this thing. Now it gets to melt your brain from the inside. Um, that's one of the things I love about it. And the game of Call of Cthulhu, I think, serves its themes and its storytelling so effectively. There are other games, and you get this in video games as well, where there's a disconnect between the gameplay and the story. They don't really feed into each other. Call of Cthulhu feeds into it massively with things like how insanity works, so like how your health works, with just things like regular mechanics, pushing rolls, which is a mechanic that I love. And again, I've stolen and I've moved into other games. All of this stuff really helps to push the themes of the game about fear and investigation and survival and being really put on the edge.
Absolutely. And even desperation at points as well with like
Yes.
pushing rolls. Oh, I love it so much. I mean, like we're talking a little bit about mechanics right now. Can you talk about like what is the basics of the character creation in this game? Like what kind of characters are people making?
So Call of Cthulhu doesn't have classes, and this is why I say Call of Cthulhu is nerdier than Dungeons and Dragons. Because in Dungeons and Dragons, you might play a gorgeous tiefling warlock, or you might play a vengeful half-elf paladin. And in Call of Cthulhu, you play a accountant named Tim with a wife and a mortgage. Um, and that's exactly how it works. You have an occupation. You have the Call of Cthulhu character sheet has your big stats at the top, which are like there isn't a charisma stat. There's like there's an appearance stat, but there's also like the normal stuff you'd expect: strength, dexterity, constitution, power, which is like willpower, intelligence, and education, which are two different things, which I quite like. Education is more about experience. Then you have a big list of skills, and depending on when your Cthulhu game is set, because again, another thing I love about it is It can be transported to different times. You can play classic Cthulhu, which is in the 1920s, all the way up to there are cyberpunk settings for Call of Cthulhu. And there's also Dark Ages and Old West and Ancient Rome, if you want to do that, which I really like. Pretty sure someone out there has made Cthulhu setting guide for like the Stone Age. Because all you have to do is swap the names of the skills. You have a big list of skills, and they range from appraisal to piloting to spot hidden, library use, charm, and depending on your occupation, plug points into those skills. So if you're a doctor, you'd have points in medicine, first aid, persuasion, maybe. And then you also have your characters' essentially hobbies. So what do they do in their free time? Maybe this doctor also, he's an equestrian, so you could put some into ride. You could put some points into, maybe he's an amateur boxer, so you could put some into fighting brawl. And the thing is, on the character sheet, no matter what skill, you at least have, well, there's an exception, but I'll get to that. You at least have 1% in it, because there's a chance you'll get lucky. For example, the rifle skill has a base of ability of like 25%. Because in theory, anybody can point a rifle and pull a trigger. Whereas something like medicine has 1%. The exception to this rule is every character, in theory every character, will start with the Cthulhu Mythos skill at 0. And by improving on this skill, by experiencing things within the mythos, you also permanently decrease your sanity. So character creation is a game of it's a game of building stats, assigning skills. Then that's kind of it. There aren't really other many boons and busts. You also have to do things like, what's your memorable place? What's a item that's important to you? Who is important to you in your life? Because by interacting with these things during downtime, that's how you regain sanity between adventures.
Ooh, that's interesting, yeah.
Yes, but the catch is, because there's always a catch in Cthulhu, is you essentially have to do a test. You might say, right, what are you doing between adventures? Oh, I'm going to go to my favorite place. Let's say it's the New York Public Library, and I'm going to spend lots of time there and just recuperate. Great, then you do a test. And if it goes, you can either not recover sanity, or you recover some, or in theory, you can catastrophically fail and associate the public library with the mods that you've seen, and you can never go back there. Only that.
Oh no.
We'll go a little bit more into Bouts of Madness because I'm obsessed with how the mechanic works. The Keeper can alter your character's sheet. You could have a serious bout of sanity loss, and the character could go, the Keeper can go, yeah, you've forgotten your wife.
Oh my
That's why
God.
all that stuff is important. So that's character creation. You're playing just regular Joe Schmoes who are being put up against forces beyond comprehension.
Yeah. It's such a solid concept, but I'm at the moment just completely stunned by the fact that the Keeper could just be like, you forgot about your wife.
Yep. Absolutely. And you take away those ways to recover for sanity. And it could also be things like lose money, and the other way I think you also have a credit rating score, which I really like, because you're not constantly worrying about individual dollars and cents. You just have a general idea of how much money your character has.
Honestly, I love that too, because you know what? I am done having to keep track of my gold in D&D and just stress out about it. Just give me a general idea of what I can
There's
afford.
only one scenario where that does come into a factor, and and I'll probably talk a bit more about this in the future, but there's one which is Masks of Nyarlathotep, which is a legendary campaign. And that one does have dollars because it involves traveling around the world.
Ah, gotcha. And that's just a campaign setting. Or not campaign setting, but
that is a full campaign, and it is widely regarded as one of the best campaigns ever written for any game.
Damn.
And I've kind of done the maths. I have a Cthulhu group who meets once a month, about 3 hours. My maths is it would take about 3 years for us to finish.
Damn. Damn. Oh, that's a big boy. That is a big game.
Musk is nuts. It's 2 volumes long.
That is impressive. That
I
is
will get there.
genuinely
It's on my
impressive.
list. I don't know how
I
I'm
will
going to
do it
pull it
one
off.
day. Absolutely. That is honestly fantastic. And I'd love to hear more about like kind of the pre-written scenarios in a bit. But I do want to kind of clarify. So when you are talking about character creation and the skills, you're saying putting points in and you're mentioning like percentage. How like what do those mean for the game? Like
Yeah,
in
so
how the game actually works?
basic role playing is a dirt easy system. No modifiers, there's no bonuses, nothing like that. You have a certain number of points in a skill. Let's make the maths easy and say you have 50% in the skill firearms, handguns, right? So that means the way Cthulhu skills work is depending on how many percent points at it gives you a rough idea of how good your character is at it. Your character has 50%, about above average. 60%, they could make money from it. All the way up to 90% where they are world leading. So 90% in something like athletics or climb would be Olympic level, gold medalist Olympic level. You would be one of a handful of people on the planet who could do it. So you're shooting, you're at a Shoggoth as it's pulling its way towards you. All you need to do, you have 2d10s. All you need to do is roll under 50, and you've passed.
Mm-hmm.
If you roll over 50, you've failed. If you roll half of 50 or under, so 25 or under, that's a hard success. If you roll a fifth, you roll 10 or less, that's an extreme success. That's it. There are fumbles. You can critically fail. It's very difficult to do. And I don't do critical failures because I don't believe in punishing the players for things that aren't their fault.
They'll get punished enough in the game.
Exactly. It's exactly. And but like guns could jam, for example, if you roll a 98, which makes for a very cinematic moment. So that's it. And that's all you need to know. No matter what you're checking for, like if you're doing a strength check or if you're doing a skill or you're in combat, it's just roll under the number and you've succeeded. Lower the better.
Absolutely. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I love roll under systems, and Call of Cthulhu has always been like, because it's D10 percentile, 2D10s, whatever it is, or I meant D100 at first, but yeah, it's basically you're just adding the two numbers together and you're getting, something from 1 to 10, not 1 to 10, 1 to 100, which makes rolling always risky, right?
Does, because there's always a chance that you're going to fail. But I also, in a lot of cases, feel like it is fairer. And also, you can, obviously, there are things like bonus dice. You get another dice and you keep the lower number. So you might roll a 70, then you might roll a 40, so you keep the 40. And you can get penalty dice where it works the opposite way around. That's as complicated as it gets. And it, because failure can be so dramatic, because failure can be so punishing, it makes for some very tense moments. But also, it's so easy to teach people. Like I ran a Dungeons and Dragons game recently. One person who played had never touched D&D before, and they were coming in with zero knowledge. And I was sat there thinking, "Oh, D&D is a terrible game for someone to start if they've never done a tabletop RPG before. It's a rough one to start with. Something like Cthulhu, I've gone with players who've never touched Cthulhu before, and they get it within 5-10 minutes because you just need to know that rule. Lower the better. That's all you need to keep in mind. There's no modifiers to worry about. Anything more complicated, figure it out when we get there. You do have options though if you fail, and you have a couple of options. You also have a stat which is luck, which is randomly assigned. Luck is, I think luck's a really interesting skill, and I think D&D needs something similar because luck dictates what the chances of something happening are when there's no skill that could be used. Let's say it's 1 a.m. You're walking down an empty highway trying to get back to Arkham. You think, right, you ask Keeper of Arcane Law, who's the games master. You say, is there a truck or something I can hitchhike? And the keeper asks, yeah, roll luck. If you succeed, then yeah, a truck pulls down. If you fail, nothing happens. So let's say you're doing a firearms roll. So we're back to our number. You need 50 or less. You roll a 55. There's an optional rule, and I like this rule. You can burn 5 points of luck. And you get rid of that luck permanently to turn that 55 into a 50 and you pass. That is a double-edged... Yeah.
That's
a double-edged sword. Because what happens is, like all these things, because then what can happen is they may need to make a luck roll in the future and you'll fail. And I've got a good story about that. I was running for my Cthulhu group, and we were getting towards the end of a session. It was a really fun scenario, and I'll talk a bit about it later, called Crimson Letters. And towards the end, it slowed down a little bit, and I thought, okay, need something that's going to pick the tension up, get people excited for next week. I thought, great, someone's going to try and run them down with a speeding car. And I called everyone for dexterity rolls to jump out of the way. Everyone succeeded, except for one player, who spent something like 20 points of their luck to get out of the way of this car. I then checked in the book how much damage a speeding car does. It's like 5d10. And considering your average Call of Cthulhu character will have 11 hit points, is devastating.
That would not have been good.
That character burnt a huge amount of luck, and at the beginning of the next session, I was going to have something happen to one of the characters, and I went, right, who has the lowest luck? And it was that person. And then they got murdered. But that's not the character, not the player. I should specify that.
Minor details.
I've been very unlucky. The other option is pushing the roll. And I love pushing the roll. I think pushing the roll is great. So firearms is a bad example because you can't push combat rolls. So we'll pick a different example. Let's say intimidation. You're trying to intimidate someone to get some information out of them, and you fail. You don't want to spend luck, or maybe your keeper isn't using that rule. So you think, great, I'm going to push the roll, which means you describe to the keeper what you're going to do differently, how you are approaching the situation differently. And the keeper says, great, if you fail, there will be a consequence. Let's say you've tried intimidating this guy and it's not working. So you get a bit more hands-on, and you grab him, and you go to pull him across the bar. You succeed, great. You get another chance to roll your dice. You succeed, great. You've done it. You've got your intimidation. You fail. You go to pull this guy. He breaks your wrist, or he draws a gun, or he's got a mate around the corner. Mm-hmm. That's pushing the roll. You have a chance, but there's a consequence. And I think that's a lovely mechanic.
That's a fantastic mechanic. I think I always like players having opportunities to be able to succeed, but with the consequences. I think the consequences are important, but I think it almost gives the players a bit more agency. Like if they really want something.
Dungeons & Dragons, I only just learned this. Dungeons & Dragons actually has that as an optional rule. One of D&D's optional rules is if a character fails a skill check, it can still succeed. There'll be a consequence, or there'll be like a penalty. So, for example, if you really need and I feel like a lot of DMs don't know this, like if you really need your rogue to open up a locked door and they fail the check, maybe they open it up, but there's a guard stood behind it. Uh-huh. And there's another game I run a lot of called Broken Compass, which is very much based in the golden age of adventure kind of stories. And that has the same thing. If a player fails a check, they still succeed, but there's a consequence. And that just builds on the chaos. Pushing a roll is a really, really good risk reward kind of thing, because sometimes the failure of pushing a roll is just a bit of damage. Sometimes it's absolutely disastrous.
It might be, just dying, but it's okay. But yeah, that's super cool. I mean, again, I didn't know a lot about the actual mechanics of Call of Cthulhu quite yet, but that explains it very clearly. that makes a lot of sense. And that's really, really cool that they allow you to push the rolls and that I also really enjoy the fact that they do have a lot of skills that it just covers so many things. It makes it so much easier.
And the other thing I like is they don't, because it is a survival horror game. The crux of survival horror is that your person shouldn't be good at everything. There's a reason combat in survival horror video games is usually clunky and stressful. Because if it was like Devil May Cry, it wouldn't be scary. So an example pulled from the Eldritch Hour podcast is towards the end, this guy's confronting a cult leader and he grabs a sword and goes to attack him with it. And Josh, who's the keeper in that game, goes, "You have a sword skill." He says no, and he goes, "Right, so it's 1% then." And so you can't always assume competence because it's survival horror. So you can always improv skills in that way. I also really like that there is, and I'll talk a little bit how sanity works because it's such an integral part of the game, but there's a skill psychoanalysis, which is like first aid, but for sanity. So in Call of Cthulhu, a huge part of the game is sanity. And the best way to think about it is like another HP. So your sanity can be decreased by witnessing various horrific things. So let's say, you open up a door and stumble on a flayed corpse, for example. You'll do a sanity roll. You'll roll just like any other skill. Let's say you currently have 70 sanity. You roll under 70, you might take no sand damage, or you might take 1. If you roll over that, if you fail, you'll take a bit more. It doesn't really become a problem until you take 5 points or more of sand damage in one turn. Let's say instead of seeing a flayed corpse, you see a zombie, and you take 5 or 6 points of sanity as this just rocks your brain. You then get to do something that I think is so much fun, which is a bout of madness. You're risking something called a bout of madness. The way this works is you then have to roll intelligence. If you succeed, you're screwed. If you fail, what happens is you've seen this zombie and you cannot truly conceive of what you're looking at. So you just wrap it up into a little ball and shove it into like a dark part of your brain, or you like explain it away. But if you succeed, you cannot deny the horrifying implications of what you're looking at. And you enter.
So they like switch up the rules.
Yeah, exactly. It's a skill you want to fail. And again, it really feeds into the themes of the smarter your character is, the more aware they are of how important the madness is around them. And so so intelligence becomes a double-edged sword. So Bout of Madness, and again, I really like how this works because it works in 2 different ways. If you're on your own, it's just you. So let's say the other investigators are off doing who knows what, and you're reading through this Eldritch tome. You can, like, the Keeper's Guide and the DM screen gives loads of suggestions. It's like you wake up 8 hours later in a sanitarium. You wake up in jail. You wake up and you've been mugged and you've lost a precious item. If you're with people, you can go blind. You could pass out. You could lose control of your legs. You can start laughing uncontrollably. The Keeper's Appendix has a 100-item list of various phobias and manias that your character can develop. I had a player develop an obsession with jumping off of high places during a game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you can imagine how that was going to go.
Yeah.
And so you have all these options. That's a Bout of Madness, and I love those. And then there's the other one, which is, I'm trying to it's not like permanent insanity. I can't remember the exact word, but it means you're in a steady loss of sanity. As if you lose a fifth or more in one adventure, it becomes so on edge. Like, if you lose any points of sanity, it'll trigger a Bout of Madness. And the Keeper gets to do things like throw hallucinations at the characters, and to throw in like paranoia or amnesia. But getting out of it isn't too difficult because getting out of it just involves getting to a safe place and getting somewhere they feel comfortable. covering the sanity is difficult. So what Bouts of Madness do is they just add on a whole other layer. And it means running into these things becomes scary because it can be the difference between your character continuing with the investigation and your character suddenly thinking that all the other investigators are out to get them.
Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good.
Again, it all feeds, it just feeds into the themes again and again. And Call of Cthulhu is trying to do one thing, and it does it really well. And Dungeons and Dragons can have a problem of trying to be all things to all people because there's so many settings and there's so many guides online of like how to turn your D&D game into survival horror. And I'm like, don't, just play Cthulhu.
Just play something that's built for it. Because I mean, like
D&D is a terrible survival horror game, and that's fine.
No, it is a terrible. It is terrible. I mean, like even just the madnesses that are in D&D are like lukewarm versus like what's in Call of Cthulhu. There's no way of even comparing.
It is, and it's that stuff that always impresses me. Talk a bit about the rules though, because as you said, they're quite easy to grasp. That's one of the reasons why in Korea and Japan, Call of Cthulhu is more popular than Dungeons and Dragons.
I've actually heard that before. Yeah.
Polygon did a really interesting article about it. Don't quote me exactly on these numbers. I recommend people look the article up. Mm-hmm. It's something like 10% of Call of Cthulhu players are Korean, whereas with other RPGs, it's closer to 1%. And one of the reasons is because it's so easy to learn, and people will take the rule set and use it to run like school games and like slice of life dramas and romance dramas, but all using the Call of Cthulhu rules because they're dirt easy. Presumably they take out the insanity mechanics, but who knows?
I'm sorry. I mean, like, okay, if you're going to do a school setting, you might as well keep the insanity mechanic in, and just it's gonna wear you down eventually.
Yeah, it would. Oh, that'd be a good setting, though.
Oh no, already planning devious things.
There's one called The Dare, where you play as like a bunch of kids, and that has its own like stat sheets. Instead of like intelligence, it's called like a no stuff roll.
That's great.
It's really cute.
My gosh.
It's really fun.
Oh my god. Yeah, and I mean like that recently they actually came out with like just a book for the basic roleplay system, right? For
very recently. They've released their to coincide with what the Pathfinder guys are doing with the Orc license. They've fully released their basic role playing, and they've basically just said, hey, here's the system we use. Throw it into whatever game you like. I like basic role playing as a rule system. I think it's not as crunchy as D&D can be, and or something like to pick an example that's not D&D, Lancer. For example, Lancer can be extremely crunchy. But as someone who likes rules-like games, it's much more up my street.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm super curious now to look farther into the basic role-playing system, because just the way that you're describing it, it's like, yes, like it's all clicking, like that sounds amazing, that sounds super cool. And especially as someone who plays with people who aren't the biggest fans of horror, it would be cool to run something within that system.
You know what, then? You might want to check out, and I promise I'm not being paid by Chaosium, but you might want to check out RuneQuest.
RuneQuest. Oh, I've heard RuneQuest, yeah.
RuneQuest is if D&D hadn't taken inspiration from 70s and 80s fantasy novels and instead took its inspiration from the Odyssey, the Iliad, that sort of thing.
Ooh, that sounds so cool. Okay, I mean, like, I'm just writing everything down. Like, check this out. That sounds amazing. I've heard quite a bit about RuneQuest, just like in passing in RPG like groups and stuff, but like your description there, yes, I need to check it out for sure now.
The easiest way to summarize it, yeah. Iron Age kind of Bronze Age kind of adventures.
Is there any other like parts of sanity that you haven't brought up?
Yeah, the psychoanalysis works by you can restore sanity briefly. You can help restore like a couple of points of sanity at a time, or like you can cure a bout of madness. The other thing for insanity works is it is possible to just lose all of your sanity, and So the way you recover HP and the way you recover sanity are both pretty grueling. Like, in a scenario, in a regular adventure, you can recover 3 points of HP, say. You could be, like, stabilized. If someone does a first aid check or a medicine check, if they succeed in those. Psychoanalysis can restore maybe 1 or 2, but you can't, like, keep doing those. Or if someone could try and keep doing them, but you could always argue it gets worse each time. So the way you restore both these things is both pretty grueling. Restore HP, you have to, like, go to a hospital and you have to do rolls to see how much HP you recover. And you recover, like, 1 hit point a week.
Oh my gosh.
And sanity is the same. If you pay for, like, a private therapist, again, you have to do rolls, which can fail and can fail catastrophically, so you can lose more and you can burn those bridges. Cthulhu is a play-to-lose RPG. You'll always get closer and closer towards that edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those
We're
are
going to
the various...
have a happy ending.
Yes, exactly. The best ending you can kind of hope for is survival. But yeah, that's really the big heat of sanity. My recommendation to people who are interested in playing this game is learn how sanity works, learn how combat works. Everything else you can kind of do on the job, as it were, but having a really good understanding of sanity will help you a lot.
Yeah, because since that is a big mechanic within the game.
It's hugely important, yeah.
Well, I mean, just mentioned it, but, like, how does combat work? How does solving conflicts within the game work?
Combat is dangerous in Call of Cthulhu. As said, your average investigator is going to have 11 hit points. Can be more, can be less. A gun, just a regular old gun, because again, this is a 1920 setting, can do 3d6 damage and can fire 3 times in a round.
Wow.
Yeah. So I quite like how combat works. I especially like, and I'll start with how melee combat works, because what melee combat does, simulates that I like, is in real life, people don't sort of stand at each other and wait for the other person to hit them and then hit back. People hit each other at the same time. People run into each other. The game simulates that. If you're being attacked, you have 3 options. You could fight back, try and get out of the way, or you could just run. So if you're fighting back, you're going for it's a person swinging at you, you go for a swing on them as well. Whoever has the best level of success wins. If you roll a regular success, the other person fails, you hit them. Congrats, well done. If you dodge and get out the way, it's the person who initiated it wins. If no one wins, if it's a draw, you dodge, and the defender wins. You have a incentive to dodge, because if you don't think you can beat them in a fight, you're more likely to avoid taking damage. That's how hand-to-hand works, and that's about as complicated as it gets. If you want to do something like weapons, just add bonuses, or add damage rather, unless it's a very specific weapon like a sword or a chainsaw. I've not done yet, but I should get round to it. Then firearms are a bit different. There's a rule I really, really like in Cthulhu. Is there's no true initiative order. It just goes in who has the most dex, who has the highest dexterity. Yeah. Unless you have your gun readied. If you specify that you have your gun readied, you have your dexterity plus 50. Because in theory, nothing is faster than pulling a trigger. Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. And then the keeper, again, double-edged sword. Because if you tell the keeper, oh, my gun is readied, let's say point about sanity they didn't mention. If you lose any sanity, any at all, the keeper gets to control you for 1 involuntary action. Oh. That could mean screaming. That could mean throwing up. That could mean dropping a weapon. Or in the case of someone's holding a readied gun, it can mean pulling the trigger. Because you've specified your finger is on the trigger. Your gun is ready to go. So there you go, double-edged sword. So firearms, more of the back and forth thing as people would expect. You basically just roll to hit, and then you roll damage. If you get an extreme success, you get penetration damage, so you do a max damage plus some. You get bonus die. You can't dodge bullets, but you can dive for cover. And then if someone's shooting at you and you're behind cover, they just shoot with a penalty die. If you're behind like chest high cover, if you're behind like a wall, they just can't hit you. Or it's with 2 penalty dies, for example, if you're like poking out. That's about it. If you fumble the roll, your gun will jam. It's a penalty, and it basically you're either adding a bonus die or you're adding a penalty die. Don't ask me how automatic weapons work. Don't ask me. I don't understand. I don't understand. I've effectively said, and it's a shame because you think the 1920s, you think Tommy gun, you think like World War II setting, you think machine gun. And so I've just said to my players, I was like, people can't have automatic weapons. You can have as many shotguns as you want. But I don't know how they work. And it's not just me. I watched a video on how to run combat. They actually said, we had to get in touch with the game designers because the book isn't super clear about this.
Well, no, that's fair. That's fair.
it's like, I'm just trying to recall it so people don't think I'm making this up. It's like, you have to roll to see how many bullets are in a volley, and then you have to roll to see how many bullets from that volley hit your target, then you roll for damage. And if you have to like calculate how wide the arc that you're firing it. It's nuts. It's not. And my brain just started making like grinding noises halfway through. And I was like, I just don't think I'm going to have automatic weapons.
Yeah, that goes from like, here's super easy, like, here's how it's run to, absolute crunch for no reason.
That being said, the other rule that a lot of people in Cthulhu don't bother with is chases. Cthulhu has specific rules for how chases, like on foot and in like vehicles, work. And from what I've read, once you get your head around it, it's a great system and it makes lots of sense and it seems very exciting. Like you're kind of dots behind. You can throw in obstacles as people catch up to these dots. And so it becomes like a proper back and forth chase. But a lot of people don't bother and just make it a dex off. So I've not had to do chases yet because the people I play with tend not to run away from things, which is never a smart idea.
Yeah, I don't know about that strategy. I'm not quite sure.
Because Call of Cthulhu's combat is built to be avoided. Like survival horror, it's clunky, it's not particularly rewarding, and it's very dangerous. As said, guns can fire multiple times. You could theoretically be killed in one round of combat. And there's no death saves in Cthulhu. Also, if you take off your HP or more in damage, if you have 10 HP, if you take 5 or more, you suffer from something called a major wound. And then you have to fight to stay conscious.
Oh, gosh.
And then you can only recover HP like 1 point per day. It's pretty... major wounds are a serious thing. And they can be properly devastating to like a game. And that doesn't have to kill you. And also, if you take all of your HP at once, so you have 10 HP, you take 10 points of damage, dead. That's it, immediate. And yeah, you can resurrect them, but that's going to be a whole other thing.
Gotta, play with some dark magic there.
Yes, exactly.
And, a lot of stuff.
The book talks about this. It's like you can give your players options to resurrect them, but it should come at an incredibly steep cost.
Yeah, because this whole thing is about majorly Lovecraftian horrors, but like things like eldritch horrors and things that you can't like quite wrap your head around and stuff like that. Like anything that is like magic or like powerful is pretty much dangerous.
Yeah, there is magic. There are spells. You can learn spells, but it's a case of learning a spell. Number one, takes a long time. You can, so there are varieties of books in Cthulhu because you have an occult skill and you also have a Cthulhu mythos skill. The Cthulhu mythos being like the truth behind everything. It's more and more you're peering behind the thin veil of reality that we wrap around ourselves like a comfort blanket. Cthulhu mythos books reveal that. They take time to study. They can take up to a year to sort of fully read through. The game gives that. It's like, here's how much you learn from a skim read. Here's how much you learn from in-depth study. And maybe you need to learn a specific language to be able to do it. The learning spells takes time. You also have heavy penalties. Almost all of them cost sanity to use. Some of them are really powerful. Some of them involve being able to pull out 100-foot tall waves. Some of them be able to do things like flip over cars, but like generate this giant invisible fists to punch through them. One of my favorite spells, which I think's broken as all hell, is Wither Limb, where it just decays the character's limb in front of them, and it permanently reduces how much health they have. And you just removed this. It's like, screw you, and removes your arm.
There's no arm anymore.
There's Dominate, and in Vampire the Masquerade and in D&D, mind control spells usually come with that pretty essential rule of you can't command someone to do something inherently dangerous. You can't command someone to walk off a cliff. In Cthulhu, you cannot say to someone, hey, kill yourself, but you can say, hey, swallow this kitchen knife. And that's different. That's different somehow.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, is swallowing the knife harmful? Will it be harmful?
It won't immediately
you try,
kill you.
Apparently.
Yeah, it's not immediate. That's the trade-off. It's like you can't command someone to just put a gun to their head and fire, but you can command them to just start, carving up carving up their thighs, carving up their arms. You can do that. It's horrific.
Ooh.
That's why safety tools are important, kids.
Yes, safety tools. Anytime you're playing a horror game, especially, survival horror games especially, safety tools. Make sure everyone
I want to
okay
make this distinction clear right now. I want to scare people. I'm not interested in upsetting people. Those are two very different things. Upsetting people is easy and cheap. I could just stick someone in a room and shout at them, and that would upset them. It's not scary. And what I've learned running Cthulhu is a lot of people want to be the victims in horror movies. A lot of people get so hyped when I talk about how this eldritch monstrosity bursts through their back and, shakes their spine around like a dog toy. Those same people aren't going to be okay with things like derogatory language or stuff about sexuality or specific kinds of violence or claustrophobia. That's fine. And I say this to any DMs who might be a bit sort of about using safety tools. Think about it instead as, hey, look at all this stuff my players left me to play with. And it's like, I want to scare people. I don't want to upset them. And so I'm always very clear where if someone says, hey, I'm not comfortable with this being in there, great. I'm not going to put that in there, but I am going to have spiders come out of your eyeballs.
Yeah. That's your trade-off,
and if you're not comfortable with that, tell me, and it won't happen again. But
it's just important to keep your. Yeah, and it's just important to make sure that everyone, because even though you're playing a survival horror game where you're going to either go insane or die in a very brutal way by the end, you want everyone to still have fun and have a good time, and you're still.
It's such a thing in horror in general because there's some horror. Which, I love the Halloween movies. I love, Hannibal. And I love, what else? I'm so excited to see Evil Dead Rise and Barbarian and all that stuff. That stuff's so much fun. Then if you have me watch something like Hostel or with, really heavy torture or about, human trafficking or sexual assault, I'm just not interested in it because that stuff happens in real life. Michael Myers doesn't exist. Jason doesn't exist. Zombies don't exist. You can carve those up with a chainsaw as much as you want. That's fun. As soon as you start throwing... whenever I do these games, there's some topics that I just don't touch because I'm like, this isn't fun. And I don't think this would be fun for other people. That's something also that people don't talk about. As a DM, you are also allowed to set your own limits. You're allowed to be like, yes, I don't want to do this because I'm not going to have fun doing it. If you're not having fun, I guarantee the players aren't either.
Absolutely. Just, make sure to have safety tools. Session 0 or at least a pre-talk if you're doing a one-shot or something, you can even make it anonymous of having people fill out papers or anything if you're playing in person or send you messages or something like that. Just make sure everyone can write, communicate what makes them uncomfortable and what they don't want in the game, just so that you can make sure everyone's having a good time.
Call of Cthulhu is so heavily grounded in things like violence and fear and mental health and sanity, and also arguably because because a lot of it's based in the 1920s, and because a lot of it is based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft, everyone's favorite racist. A lot of it is also based in things like Fear of the Unknown, xenophobia, and the degree to which you have like sexism or homophobia or racism in your game can be up to you as the keeper and you as your players. Some players might just want to skim over that in its entirety. Other people might want to address it. Some people might want to use horror, pull a common example, something like Get Out. Want to use horror as a way to explore those themes, and that's a good thing. It's about establishing those limits, and it's about seeing where people's lines are, and being respectful of them and adapting that accordingly.
Absolutely.
As
very, very
anyone who runs Cthulhu, you have to be aware of H.P. Lovecraft's legacy. I think he was a very, very interesting man. I think he codified an entire genre of horror. I think his works had an incredible lasting impact. I also think a lot of it is heavily grounded in white supremacy and racism, and you should at least be aware of that when running these games.
Absolutely. Yeah, very important.
These are all important themes, and I think one of the reasons I love horror as a genre is it gives people tools to explore dark and challenging themes. Because you could make you can make comedy films about grief, and you can make comedy films about racism. But if you want to explore how these things deeply affect a person, horror is a really good genre to do that.
Absolutely. And what I like about horror is it can also be a very controlled environment to explore those things, because if it's like if you're watching a movie, you can, if it goes too far, if it gets too uncomfortable, you can turn that off. And that's the important thing with safety tools in horror games, is that you have to make sure it's a controlled and safe environment for everyone, because you can't always just turn it off. You can't just always leave. You have
there's
to
other
make sure
people
that
involved.
everyone is okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
Always a good time to rant about safety tools. It's so important. So very important.
And keep drilling those, because useful.
They're incredibly useful. I mean, Monster of the Week it can get, you can make it more gruesome or whatever. You can make it more intense than it is. But when I started my game, I made sure to go over, all right, what is everyone okay with? What is everyone not okay with? Here's things that I don't want to touch. And just making sure we all are on the same page of our expectations for the game, and if we want to go more horror, if we want to go more investigation, so forth, just to make sure everyone is going to have a good time. Expectations are important.
But speaking of expectations, don't go into Call of Cthulhu expecting a shootout and to get into a punch off with a Hound of Tindalos and getting out of it in one piece. It does happen. Crazy things have happened and dice rolls go wrong. But it's not a combat-heavy game. That's what Pulp Cthulhu is for.
Yeah. Play something that will fit what you want. But if you want to die or go insane, play Call of Cthulhu.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I would love to hear a bit more, though, about the keeper side of running Call of Cthulhu, because like you said, this was the first game that you kind of felt the call to actually run it.
Yeah, it's a great way to describe it. I very much did feel the call. When I kind of got introduced to it, it just seemed so easy to learn, and I really liked the themes, and the mechanics seemed like a lot of fun. And it was just something about it that got my imagination ticking, wanted to get me involved. And then I played with a handful of people, and I found I had a bit of a knack for it. And that first session is always going to be the scariest. It's always going to be the most overwhelming. And from there, because the rules are so straightforward, it really is just a case of being able to throw things at your players. Planning a mystery can be very difficult, but there are lots of pre-written scenarios you can use. There's tons online if writing a mystery seems a bit, a bit intimidating, and mystery is a tough genre. But being the keeper, I really recommend it. If you like horror and you like telling horror stories, and you think it would be fun to like just throw this kind of misery at your players, and you get to really be part of the excitement. You get to just basically a catchphrase at my table where I just go like, "Hey, can you roll spot hidden?" And they fail, and I just go, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And it's just like, and it's so, and you get to just have lots of those moments, and those are very, very satisfying. There's really not too much to say. It's very exciting. It's easy to learn. Once you've gotten the keeper's book, like the keeper's guide, has lots of good advice on how to run the game, and there's lots of good advice on building like a horror atmosphere. And anything that kind of comes up, because you know what kind of game it is, because it's a survival horror game, you don't know the exact rule. It's very easy to just generate one. It's very easy to kind of go, right, I don't know the exact rule for how this works, but you know that it's a basic role-playing system, so you know what kind of role someone has to do. You know that it's a survival horror game, so you know that they can't just brush this stuff off, and you can go from there.
Absolutely. Oh, that's really cool. And we talked a little bit earlier about Call of Cthulhu with its reference tools.
Yes. Yeah. So one of the things I love about Cthulhu is it's very easy to get into. It has a very, very, I think, very low barrier of entry because its rules are very straightforward. It has a very low cost of entry because the quick start comes with a pretty big collection of basic rules, including how to make your own character, which a lot of quick starts kind of keep the main rule set. And I understand that. You want people to buy the proper book. Also comes with a selection of characters you can play as, and it comes with a very good first scenario called The Haunting, which I've run for a number of people, and everyone always likes it. The Haunting is an amazing scenario, and it's totally free. And from there, you could use DriveThruRPG, which is an online sort of repository for RPGs, and there's lots of free Cthulhu games on there. Chaosium themselves release free Call of Cthulhu scenarios every now and again. Then from there, you only really need the keeper screen if you like to accessorize. You've probably already got 2d10s. And you just need the keeper's handbook. There is a player's handbook. It's pretty useless. I say that with all the love in the world. It has how to create an investigator. It has like a lot of equipment lists, and it has a H.P. Lovecraft story in it. That's about it. It's not a super useful tome.
Interesting.
It doesn't have like the D&D's player guide. It doesn't have like here's how combat works, for example. That's all kept up to the keeper. But along with what you get in the reference, along with that stuff, there's also like a quick reference guide, which has like, hey, here's a common list of weapons. Here's a common list of vehicles. Here's a common list of equipment. Here's a selection of insanities. Here's a selection of like potential threats. Just all very quick reference tables. You know, Vampire the Masquerade has something similar. Yeah, and you can go on Chaosium's website and get the quick start and all that. Now it's very straightforward to get started with Cthulhu.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, I love when any game makes it easy to actually.
You've got the starter set, haven't you?
Yes, I do. I have the starter set, and I also do have the Keeper's rule book. But I haven't.
The starter set is fantastic. The starter set is so good.
Really.
It's got a collection of. There's 3 scenarios. It's got what's it called? Edge of Darkness, Dead Man's Stomp, and Paper Chase. Edge of Darkness, I love. I've got a great story from that scenario. I've run that a few times. It's got a collection of rules, which it's expanding a bit more on the quick start rules, and again, it's good to go on. It's got a solo adventure for teaching the keeper how to play the game, and it's got dice, and it's got character sheets and maps. And they've just reprinted it. That's, if you're interested, that's absolutely worth picking up. The other thing Chaosium does really well is it kind of goes, hey, where do you start? Get this, then get this, then get this. This is the best order to go in. It's like,
that is so extremely
do
helpful.
The quick start first, do the free quick start, then do the starter kit, and do the scenarios in the Keeper's rulebook, because those are three, again, the ones in the Keeper's rulebook are pretty good. Then get this book, Doors to Darkness, which are more scenarios designed for beginner keepers. There, go nuts. It's got very clear. Vampire the Masquerade doesn't have that. Vampire the Masquerade, for a game which is built on its tabletop RPG, I think Vampire the Masquerade makes it really difficult to get. And D&D, because D&D produces so many books, it doesn't have like a really clear, hey, get this, then get this, then get this. Because, again, I swear I love D&D. I'm not just sitting here to drag on it. D&D does try to be all things to all people.
It does. And I do love it as well. It was my first game, but the campaign books are, they try so hard and they just do not hit. They don't do it. They're more trouble than they're worth sometimes.
And I feel like, and this sounds like such a drag, I feel like whenever a new campaign book comes out, I always see reviews on it and everyone's like, it's okay. And I'm like, where are the really good campaigns? What am I missing? But we can't all play Dragon Heist forever.
And even then, you still have to modify.
Yeah, because you have 3 options.
Oh man, but I love that they make it so easy. That has been when I decided to run my first game of D&D. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna run a campaign book, because that is obviously, it feels like that's the first thing you should do. If you want to do the easiest thing, run a pre-written thing. Yeah, and then I get books. I got 2. I got Ghost of Saltmarsh and I got Out of the Abyss. And I'm like, all right. And so I'm flipping through them. I'm like, these are kind of not terrible, but I just did not like the direct. Yeah, you need experience, especially with actually modifying the modules themselves. They are just kind of poorly planned out as well. You have to do a lot of flipping back and forth. And I'm just getting extremely overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I'm running my own game. I'm just going to make something up and we're going to go with it. And that has been so much easier. But actually having good pre-written scenarios or modules, amazing.
Yeah, the other thing
absolutely amazing.
So Chaosium, when you're looking through its scenarios, you've got so much choice. You can search by the ones just for 7th edition. You have ones that they very clearly label, hey, these scenarios are free. You can play these ones for free. They've got the Miskatonic repository, which is their drive-through RPG account, which is just Call of Cthulhu scenarios. Some of those are free. There's a really, really good one called Viral, where you play as YouTubers, which I'm so keen to try out, because the idea of getting to slaughter a bunch of douchey YouTubers is incredibly funny to me. I've just got this idea of one of them is an ASMR YouTuber, and so I'm going to put the mic up to my face. So they spend the whole scenario talking like this and rapping their fingers against stuff. It's just very funny to me. And you can do all that. Plus, they give a full guide on how to convert the rules for any of their old scenarios into the current rule set. They have a huge backlog of scenarios because this game has been around for a while. And a lot of them they have digitized. And you can just go and you can play those and convert the rules. One of their most famous ones is called Beyond the Mountains of Madness, which is a sequel to the H.P. Lovecraft story, which I think is a really cool idea. And there's so many free ones. And then again, they've got something like Doors to Darkness, which is a collection of scenarios for beginner keepers. They're for beginner keepers because they are not linear, but they offer a lot of information. They offer a lot of tips. They're very clear with this is what they see. This is what you need to roll for. This is what they might find. And they do things like the keeper might want to. They can't help you if your players go, oh, I think we're going to go to New Orleans. And just, if they just decide to, go off to another city. I always like to make a point whenever I run scenarios of going you guys can just leave. We'll all go home, but you can just not do this. It's a very realistic option. If you say, "Oh, you've uncovered a tomb deep below the sands of the Sahara Desert, undisturbed for centuries," and you go, "I'm not interested, actually," I'll go, "All right, I'll see you all next week."
I'm good. I'm not ready to die today.
The Haunting is one I recommend people start with because it's free. I think if you are brand new to running games, it can seem a little overwhelming because it isn't a super clear process. All you have to worry about, really, is one house. It's a haunted house story.
Ooh.
There's a bed, and I guess spoilers for the scenario of The Haunting. The bed can kill players, so just be wary of the bed, and you may need to modify your dice rolls accordingly. So The Haunting is a great one to start with because it's an investigation. It's a haunted house. It's It's very easy to run. It's very easy to make creepy and atmospheric. And it's a really good introduction to the Cthulhu mythos as a whole, and it's a very good sort of how do all of your different player characters meet kind of scenario.
Oh, that's really, really good. Oh, so I'm curious. So, like, there are a lot of scenarios, and a lot of them seem really good for like one shot or even like, mini games.
Yes.
How well does Call of Cthulhu work for full campaign style play?
See, that's where you've got me because I've never done a big full campaign because I think Cthulhu does work really well for one shots and for mini arcs because it means you get to make things more deadly. It means you can it means your players don't get drawn into complacency quite so quickly. And I've talked to Mike Mason, who's actually written a lot of the Call of Cthulhu modules. I've actually chatted to him about this. And my kind of advice was, how do you stop players? My question was, how do you stop players getting and entering in a scenario and going, right, we're going to do ba-dum, 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 because that's what's worked before. And the answer is just mix things up. Maybe all of a sudden it's not about discovering. Maybe it's all about trying to find a way out. Maybe something's after them. So I think Cthulhu absolutely could work for longer style play. And there are scenarios built for 1 to 3 sessions, all the way up to scenarios that could last you a year, 18 months. Most legendary of these is Masks of Nyarlathotep, which has been reprinted multiple times. It's 2 volumes long. It's a quest around the world to try and stop the apocalypse. It's terrifying and huge, and that would go for a long, long time. The other one is like Madness on the Orient Express, which is about the train journey. And you, again, go through loads of countries. You go to different time periods. There are like prequels in ancient Rome to like expand on what's happening and things like that.
Crazy.
There are modern scenarios to see like what happened afterwards. So I think as long as your players understand that they will almost certainly need backup characters, having campaign play can be really beneficial. Because when I do one shots, I end up having to say to people, you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about that because it's all stuff for downtime. So there's definitely things, unlike, and not trying to rag on it, D&D, and more in the way of like Vampire the Masquerade, the game gives you incentive to work on these things during your downtime.
Absolutely.
So there's how you get your sanity back, how you get your health back, how you can build these bonds. And as long as your character has good motivation to keep doing what they're doing, and as long as the keeper can kind of keep players interested and can keep presenting these monsters in interesting ways, and I think Cthulhu does work really well for campaign play. But, that being said, because it's so easy to learn, it's a really good fit for one-shots as well.
Works a little bit of both ways.
Yes.
Love that. So I'm actually really curious. So we keep mentioning the monsters and, the stuff, like the horrors and all of that mythos. And in the Keeper's rulebook, because I flipped through it, there's quite a lot of like reference things and like almost like stat blocks, sort of, for a bunch of these. What is your opinion opinion on like what they've pre-done.
Yeah, I've really got no complaints. I think the monsters are all really good. I think the ones that it makes, some of them are things like, hey, this thing has a strength of 230, so you're never going to beat it in a strength
Okay.
test. You might do in theory, if it gets unlucky, or if you get really, really lucky, for example. And I really like how it differentiates between, here are the regular Eldritch monsters, so things like Hounds of Tindalos, Shoggoths, zombies, ghouls, servants of Galaki, blah, 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 blah. And then you have the gods. You have things like Azathoth and Cthulhu and the Goat Mother and all these, and Nyarlathotep. And you have all of these, and you can't touch these. You can try, but like just looking at Azathoth is 1d100 sanity. And just get the sanity test. If you fail, is you lose up to a maximum of 100 sanity. I think with Cthulhu, it's like 70 sanity. And even specifies like, hey, if you destroy these, if you somehow manage to destroy Azathoth, I'm fairly sure suspends the entire universe in his imagination, he'll just reform after a week. You can't kill these things. It's like, hey, how many attacks does Azathoth get in a round? 5. How many spells do they know? All of them. And like, so you can't throw your players up against the gods, but you can throw them up against their minions, and you can throw them up against humans. The other thing the book does that I really like is it gives stats for generic monsters like wolves and bears and vampires and mummies and zombies. So if you want to do a vampire story or you want to do a werewolf story, that's all in there.
Oh, that's so cool. It's very, there's a lot of flexibility in what you can do.
Yeah, and if it's a case of like, oh, this creature doesn't have a luck stat, for example, just go, yeah, it's 50. Because again, there's no modifiers or anything to worry about.
Yeah, just make one up.
Make one up.
It seems like this is very easy to like just make something up on the fly. I love that. I love that so much. So I think like two more like big question things. First one, and this is maybe a little loaded, but I'm just curious of like what you'd say. What do you love most about Call of Cthulhu?
It's how the mechanics inform the themes of the game. Mechanics continually reinforce the themes. And every time I play Call of Cthulhu, because it's the game I always come back to, I stepped away from running Call of Cthulhu because I just didn't really want to run like dark, serious stories. I'm very kind of bounced between a lot of games. And I ended up running, and I'm back to running it now, and I've run I've run other stuff since then, so it's all good. But every time I run it, I'm just sat there thinking, oh, damn, this game is well made. And I'm just sat there thinking, yeah, that does make sense, doesn't it? There's very rarely a rule where I'm like, oh, no, that just doesn't work. That clashes. Yeah, so it's just how well it reinforces its own storytelling, how well it reinforces sanity and survival. I think that is really commendable for it. And I think just how easy it is to teach and to pick up. You can get people who've never played it and they can understand it. And they only really need to remember one thing, and that's the lower you roll, the better you've done.
Absolutely. Oh, that's great. I mean, like, already, if everything you've said wasn't convincing enough for me to play Call of Cthulhu,
Do you want to hear the flamethrower story? I don't know if you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was just going to ask. If you have any like more stories that you would like to share, because I am all for this.
So one of my favorites is the flamethrower story. So it's in the scenario called Edge of Darkness, and in this scenario, at the very end, players are in a cabin trying to banish an eldritch horror which has taken residence in the attic above them. The eldritch horror cannot enter the main room, but it can send its various minions to like try and break down the seals that are protecting it. One of these minions is a zombie bear. Earlier on in the scenario, one of the players had said, "Hey, can I get a flamethrower?" And I said, "Sure," because I don't like saying no to people. And I had them, and again, like I had them roll luck. to see if they could find access to one. The guy's character was a bit of a dodgy dealer, so I established with him that he could roll luck to see if he could get stuff on the black market, which I really liked. I thought that was a very fun idea. So he gets one and gives it to another player, and this player is on guard. He stood in front of the closed door as this bear is trying to rip these protective wards. He says, I'd like to shoot it with the flamethrower. And I went, at the closed door? He said, yes. I checked in the book, and flamethrowers in real life, especially back in the 1920s, didn't work like they do in movies. In movies, a flamethrower is a very controlled jet of flame, maybe 6 feet long. In real life, a flamethrower works by firing out a huge burst of flammable liquid, which is then ignited. So the range of a flamethrower in Call of Cthulhu, and this is in the book, is 72 feet.
Oh my lord.
So this person standing within touching distance of this door fires, and I was like, well, it's fire, not a bullet. The water soaks the liquid soaks the door, soaks the ceiling, which then all gets ignited. The cabin starts to burn down. One player ends up freeing the Eldritch Abomination because it was the last session and they were kind of going a bit nuts with it. He ends up running off into the woods, never to be seen again. That player who started the fire ends up waiting for this thing to materialize so he can attack it, and it doesn't, and just rips his heart out of his chest. Another player ends up brokering a deal with it, and it then kills him a year later. What's the other story?
It's so wild. That is so insanely wild.
It's so wild. Yeah, I said the character that got murdered at the beginning of the session, where it was a case of so he stabs you with a knife, does 9 damage. How much HP does your character have? 7. Oh. I admittedly felt quite bad about that because we just started.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, and Bouts of Madness will always add in twists and things to get excited about. The next session after that, the players all loaded themselves up with guns, and they didn't help. I assume they felt better for having them.
It at least feels safer. It feels safe.
It provides a false sense of security. Yeah,
exactly.
My first TPK. The last. It was the first.
Yes.
TPKs will happen in Cthulhu. Just again, as a keeper, if you is lasting a campaign, you may want to pull your punches a little bit. But if it's a one shot, go nuts. Just try not to kill off players in the first half an hour, because then they're kind of just sat there. You don't have a backup.
Oh, that's so unfortunate.
Yeah, with the character who got murdered in the first 10 minutes. I had a backup character, but we because they were halfway through an investigation, I had to be well, what should we do now? What do you think, Maeve, who's definitely been here the whole time and just hasn't said anything?
Yep. Perfect.
Standing there
Perfect
silently.
way to do it. That is so good. Oh my gosh. Yes. And do you have any stories from when you were a player, even the first time that you played Call of Cthulhu?
You know what? I've not played it. I've not been a player.
You haven't played it? You've just run it?
You say this, but Josh, who's the keeper from the Eldritch Hour, I was in touch with him, and he said, yeah, I've never played it. He's only ever run it. And I feel like I should play it to sort of get the experience. But I can talk about other people's first time playing. I ran a little one shot to try out a new book of scenarios I got, which were, again, useful stuff. It's a collection. It's called Doors to Dark. It's called I can't remember what this one's called. Gateways of Terror. That's it. Gateways of Terror. It's 3 scenarios, all designed to be finished in about an hour. They're for one shots, or they're for introducing a person to the game. And I did that, and I had a couple of players, and they were wonderful. They were so much fun. And it was a case of one of them came up with lore that he was possessed by this spirit who was desperate to use this ancient Egyptian battle axe. They all died. They all got horribly mangled. Yeah, it's good. I promise it's a fun game. I promise.
I mean, if you want to die,
keep having to reinforce
Play
that
Call of
it is
Cthulhu.
fun. It's fun. You will just get mangled.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's. I mean, if you're playing again, if you're gonna play Call of Cthulhu, especially if the keeper explains it right, there's no way you're going into the game thinking, I'm
I'm
ready
gonna be a
for my
superhero.
adventures in the world. Yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna become powerful and all of that. Like, you should know you're going to die or something bad is gonna happen by the end.
And
Like, make sure.
but that's such a major theme in all the Lovecraft stories. Anytime there is one Lovecraft story where humanity has a distinct victory against the mythos, and that's at the ending of the oh my god, it's completely gone out of my head. What's the one where the guy goes to Dunwich?
Fish
Well,
people.
it's not even the Dunwich Horror. That's the one with that's the one with the guy living in the that's the one with the guy living in the barn.
Oh my gosh,
Innsmouth.
too many fish people.
There we go. Shadow over Innsmouth. Oh my god. So as I was saying, it's called the Shadow over Innsmouth. I knew that the first time. I didn't look anything up. But at the end of Shadow over Innsmouth, the US Navy destroys where these deep ones have been living. That's the one story where people win. And all they're doing is delaying the inevitable. It's kind of depressing. So it's important to try and make it fun. It is a hopeless
They win, but
it's like
I mean, like,
one of my favorite Cthulhu adjacent books is the Cthulhu case books by a wonderful author called James Lovegrove, who's one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes pastiche authors. He's written a trilogy of these, with one more coming out in October. And at the end of those books, Holmes wins. But it's at huge, huge cost. And Watson writing them is also really troubled. So the idea is you can win, but it's always going to be at a huge cost. But I would argue something very liberating in hopelessness. Things can't get 101% fucked.
of course, it can only get so bad.
Yeah, and so it's like, your character might end up in jail, or my character might end up in an institute, in Arkham Asylum for the rest of their lives. But you can just roll up a new character and go see what that strange noise was in the back of the library.
What a game!
Okay.
Like, so seriously, it's so cool, and like, I haven't gone super deep into the like Cthulhu stuff in general, but like this definitely makes me want to. Just like talking about it now and hearing the stories and all of that, I want to run some one shots so bad.
Yeah, recommend The Haunting. I recommend the ones in Doors to Darkness are very good. There's Genus Loci, which I really like. Doesn't really work as a one shot, but I think it's a really intriguing story. And the ones in the starter one, Dead Man's Stomp is okay. Dead Man's Stomp works as a two-parter a bit better. The one I really recommend, which was a bit of a challenge for me as a keeper because it was the most free-form scenario I've ever done, is called Crimson Letters. It's in the Keeper's book. It is a straight-up murder investigation. And all at Miskatonic University. So if you're playing with people who know their Cthulhu mythos, it's really fun to see them like get hyped over like random names. Like in the Eldritch Hour, they were playing this scenario and they say like, oh, there's a family tree. And he goes, oh, do I recognize any of the names of the family tree? He goes, not unless you're really into Lovecraft.
That is so fair. Oh my gosh. But it's so cool though. Like Vampire the Masquerade, we were talking, is like super, like, it is filled to the brim with lore and story and all of that. But Call of Cthulhu is as well. It doesn't seem like in the books and in the scenarios, yes. But it's not like shoved down your throat kind of.
In
like
the scenarios, at the beginning of each scenario, there will be loads of information that the keeper gets that the players will never learn. It'll be things like, hey, what's the origin of this thing? What's the origin of this monster? And the players may never discover that. But you as the keeper get to use that information, get to use it to inform your game. That's my advice I think for new keepers, don't over-explain anything. Don't. It's supposed to be mysterious and ununderstandable. And if players go, as long as the rules are all consistent, if players go, that doesn't make sense, it's like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. Keep everything unknown. Never answer any questions.
Yes, the unknown is always scarier. Always.
It really is. But yeah, unless you have any final thoughts, I think we are at the end.
I just wanted to say, thanks so much for this opportunity, and thanks so much for bringing light to other RPGs out there. D&D is an extremely popular tabletop RPG, and for good reason. But there are so many tabletop RPGs that do really niche things really well. And if you want to tell niche stories, so I've run Call of Cthulhu, which, again, because it's so easy to learn, because there's such a wealth of really good material out there, it's just always such a joy to run. I've run Vampire the Masquerade, which is great for telling very personal and political. It's got some of the best role play mechanics and social mechanics I've ever seen in an RPG. It's great for telling those kind of stories. I'm currently running Broken Compass, which, if you like stuff like Tomb Raider or Indiana Jones or The Mummy, is just this juicy rules light system for telling just fun, kind of wacky blow off Golden Age of Adventure kind of stories with your pals. That's really good fun. And there's so many other ones I want to look at. Seventh Sea, which is also by Chaosium, which is about
Yes.
stories of intrigue and swashbuckling adventure, and things like Monster Hearts, about the scariest thing of all, puberty, and things like Monster of the Week for doing Buffy, and it's just, the list just keeps going and going and going. And I think the more light gets shone, the less time people will spend trying to break Dungeons and Dragons over their knee.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much. I mean, that was just amazing right there. But thank you. I mean, thank you for coming on and talking about Call of Cthulhu. I've been trying to look for someone to talk about it, because it's a huge game. It is absolutely huge. And I was like, oh man, I got to find the right person. And then I saw your account, I'm like, yes. And this has just been amazing. So thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm always happy to info dump about Call of Cthulhu.
It's only the natural way of, once you start getting into other TTRPGs, it's going to be that is the only thing that you can talk about, and that is on your mind all the time.
Absolutely.
But yes, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening. Again, Luke's name is Arcanekeeper. You can find him on all of his social medias, on Instagram, YouTube, and what was the other one?
TikTok. Right? I've fallen to the TikTok mass. Inexorable force.
Its own, eldritch being TikTok.
Really
His info will also be in the description of this episode. But yes, thank you so much for listening.
Very much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the RPG Goblin. I hope that you had a great time. If you've gotten this far, let's try something new. On my latest Instagram or Twitter post or whatever, comment brain in some form, just to know who all got to the end. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you really enjoy this podcast and want to support it, I would really appreciate you following the RPG Goblin on your favorite podcast platform, following the RPG Goblin on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, any of those social media platforms. They're all in the description below. And I'd really appreciate if you took the time to follow those, because any little bit of support helps keep this podcast going. So I would really appreciate it if you did. Thank you to Arcanekeeper for coming on and talking about Call of Cthulhu. I really, really appreciate it, and it was a fantastic time. Still super excited to try out the game, and can't wait for that. If you haven't followed Arcanekeeper yet either, his username is in the description below, and he is on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. Now, the next episode of the RPG Goblin will be coming out Friday, May 5th. Starting a new month, and it is going to be all about collaborative character creation with my brother. And we are just going to be talking about our experiences with collaboratively making characters and even forming campaigns and one-shots around collaborative character creation. So that is going to be super awesome and can't wait for you to listen to that. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Again, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you again next week.